Viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bob Report. Now, for the first segment of the conversation, we're going to have a conversation on the just concluded Spice Mass 2025 in Grenada. Of course, like many Grenadians, I too got the cold, not as bad as my friend did. I don't know if you're calling this cold the callaloo leaf or what are we calling it, but a lot of Grenadians who were affected by the cold following the conclusion of the carnival season. It's become sort of a ritual these days. But for the first segment of the program, folks, what we want to do is to talk about the highlights, lowlights, and of course, controversial and more bright moments from Spice Mass 2025. And I want to bring in Dexter Mitchell, a regular guest on the Bob Report, to start off this conversation. Of course, as a programming note, we did attempt to reach the CEO of Spice Mass Corporation, that is Mrs. Cecil Noel, and also Ian Charles of Jambalasi, Grenada, also initially agreed to come on the program for this segment, but unfortunately he had to cancel. So Dexter, welcome to this week's edition of the Bob Report.
Thank you very much for having me, Dr. Bob. I'm just recovering from, I guess it's either the grisette or the callaloo. I'm not sure which one is
I would go with the callaloo.
Callaloo, okay, yeah, just recovering.
Yep.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Dexter, in a nutshell, and of course, I did see a write-up on the just concluded Spice Mass, but let us begin with, I suppose, the areas that I think all of the national community would agree with, that this year's Spice Mass was, in fact, overall big picture, was, in fact, a successful season.
Yes, it was a wonderful climax to the season. Especially Carnival Monday and Tuesday. Well, the weekend of activities, starting I guess with the Soca Monarch, well, Queen Show, Soca Monarch, and then the fetes and the parade on the streets of St. George's on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. So I think it was a wonderful climax to the Carnival season. The number of visitors, I think, was historic numbers in terms of the people coming to Grenada, and I guess as we go on, we will look into the factors that contributed to those visitor arrivals. Yeah, but it was a wonderful climax. All the reports, especially from the visitors, have been glowing in terms of the enjoyment at the climax of Spice Mass.
But it was also a safe event. You know, the Royal Grenada Police Force did not report any major incidents at all of any kind of criminal activity.
Well, that in my analysis, my SWOT analysis, I recorded that as one of the strengths. There's a certain kind of innocence about our celebrations, Dr. Bob, and then we have a commitment to having fun, so that when that time comes, we do not want any violence. I saw a policeman made a note of it earlier on in the season that he loves to walk in Guelph, because for people, when it comes to celebration, they will do citizens arrest and bring people into the station if they are interrupting the fun. And I think that is the nature of Grenadians. So yeah, we don't normally, I mean, if we go back previous years, we don't normally have major acts of violence. Probably when we had the ginger and blood sting, but outside of that, normally Grenada's Carnival is safe. I think we need to note, coming from the police, the increase in vehicular accidents, and I think that is something that public service announcements, probably more monitoring of drivers and so on, we need to look at, with the increased number of vehicles on the road, with more vehicular activity, with visitors traversing the roads of Grenada and so on. That is something we need to look at. But generally, when it comes to having a good time, we stop the nonsense in terms of the violence, and we look towards having a really good time.
Now, you mentioned in your analysis the music. The music certainly was a bright spot, and it continues to be a bright spot for Grenada. And of course, this year was no exception. Of course, we also have to acknowledge that in the lead up to Carnival, Build the Vibes Grenada lost a very talented young producer in Build the Vibes. He was laid to rest a couple of days before the festivities got into true high gear. But let us talk about the music this year.
And condolences to the family, the friends, the artists who work with Build the Vibes. The music this year, it is a continuous progression. every year we seem to take some additional steps. We seem to do things a little bit better than we've done. So this is a continuation of what has been happening for the last probably 20, 25 years, that we are getting better. We are utilizing the technology to produce better quality music. I still have issues with not enough musicality, not enough use of the musical instruments as opposed to using the technology to make music. But in terms of providing quality music, the technology is helping us in that regard. And then we take some risks, Dr. Bob, that other territories don't in terms of making music. So, for example, nowhere else in the world would you get a song like Grisit, the Kalalu song, the Donkey song. Last year it was Guanaman. Before that, we had Talpri with Uluman or Pipin. Those kind of unique songs, and those songs that come out of just out of us, out of our daily interaction with each other, our conversations. And we incorporate those things. We get very creative and incorporate them into songs. And of course, we utilize them to great fun and enjoyment. So that continues. Then, of course, you have the short pre, the return of short pre, and the quality music that he continues to produce. Little One and what he has done with Terror Kid. And let me just mention here, Terror Kid, who has been extremely consistent for probably the last 10 to 15 years, that almost every season for over that period, Terror Kid has produced at least 2 major hits in the carnival season. So, like I said, it has been a progressive act. We didn't just suddenly wake up in 2025 and produce great music. Dash has been doing wonderful work over the last 10 years or so. Look at what Golan has done, and congratulations to him. He has, again, the mark of consistency and progression and ascending to the throne of the groovy monarch. Congratulations to him. And I also noted in my write-up, Muddy, Little Kerry, and Buba, while they are newcomers in terms of winnings or getting, well, Muddy winning his first crown, and congratulations to him, and Buba and Little Kerry coming very close. They have put in over 30 years of experience and production of music here in Grenada. So it is a continuation of the process, and I'm really happy for the music, the direction it is going in. I mean, we still have a ways to go to commercialize it properly so that the artists can really benefit, because once we are done with the season, unless they get some bookings outside of Grenada, they are not getting any copyright royalties or anything like that. And that's another conversation that we'll probably have later on in the conversation.
And speaking of music, one of the, I suppose, low points of this year's carnival season in the context of music has to do with the conclusion of the Dimash Gras show and the results that emanated from that. Is that a narrative? Is that a debate that you've been paying attention to?
Yes, I have been paying attention to the debate. Quite frankly, I have not looked at the competition as yet. I have not looked at the Calypso finals as yet. So I would not comment on specifically what I think or who I think should have or should not have won. However, I would like to express my concern about the appointment of judges. And it seems that over the last 2 or 3 years, there is a special group that have been assigned judges' responsibility. So in 2025, information reaching me that there are only 24 judges who've been handpicked and who attended the judges' workshop. I was told that it was not necessarily made available to the general public, so that if you're not part of that grouping, you did not have a chance to express interest in judging. So I think we need to fix that. In the past, we've had a judges association where people had to go in, get training, had to do test judging to determine their competencies and so on. People had to show that they knew about calypso, they knew about creativity, writing, had a little bit of musical background. So I'm worried about the selection of judges and that process that allows this 7 or 8 persons to judge calypso on the finals night. But in terms of whether Scholar should have won or should not have won, I cannot say yet because I have not looked at the competition. But if so many people are talking about it, it warrants some looking into by the authorities. So while like I said, it was a wonderful experience and a wonderful full climax, we have to be careful how we are moving forward, because a lot of those bands and brands are taking money away from the Grenadian economy. So a lot of that money is not necessarily staying here in Grenada. And because it happens, life is a cycle. There is going to be a point when to them, Grenada is not going to be an attractive destination. And I think I listed in one of my threads, St. Vincent. They might move to St. Vincent. St. Lucia is a very attractive destination now also. So what happens then? We have to go back to what we have as traditional, and we have to be careful that we do not lose what we have as authentically Grenadian. One of the things I'm happy to see is that a lot of those bands, those regional and international bands, they're incorporating the Grenada Monday Night Mass experience in what they're offering. So that when you buy a ticket to play Mass with a particular band on Monday and Tuesday, you can play Juve, you can play Monday Night Mass and parade on the streets on Tuesday, which is wonderful for the visitor, giving them a full Grenadian experience. But we cannot lose what is traditional and what is indigenous and unique to Grenada.
And finally, Dex, those you and of course you mentioned St. Vincent. Opportunities, finally.
Like I said, the people who are coming in, the hordes and hordes of visitors, we have to find a way to attract them to the other things that they're besides what they are coming for. So we know they're coming for the specific feds, the feds that the brunches and so on. They are coming to play Mass on Monday and Tuesday on the streets of Grenada. But we have to find a way to get them out of St. George's, make sure that they visit the sites, go on tours, make sure that we provide quality food so that they can leave some of that money here with us. Because when they buy into the bands, all of that money goes outside of Grenada. But we have to sell Grenada to them, sell Grenada's uniqueness to them. So, for example, one of the things that we hear, one of the complaints we hear, Dr. Bob, is the music on the streets. Now, people are blaming the DJs. No, the DJs are playing what they hired to play. The person who is putting on the band has curated an experience for that visitor that includes a certain percentage of music from outside of Grenada, and they might select 4 or 5 songs from Grenada to go along with that. So we have to ensure that we get them into an environment where they can enjoy things Grenadian. And most of those events are all inclusive. So when they do have to eat and drink outside of the fete and the band experience, we have to ensure that it is top notch, that they're saying, yes, I really want to come back to Grenada on my own without the confines of the bands and the fetes to really enjoy the true Grenadian experience, or I want to visit Grenada outside of the carnival season. That is a wonderful opportunity for us because in truth and in fact, those bands, and kudos to them and those fetes, are doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. They are marketing Grenada. They are providing an opportunity for, like I said, hordes of people who normally we don't have access to visit Grenada. So kudos to them and hats off to them for that. And we have to be grateful. But we also have to utilize that opportunity now to find out what we need to do, the things that we need to do to make sure that they have inside of the curated experience, a Grenadian experience that would attract them back to the destination.
And Dexter, any final comments from you as we bookend the end of this carnival season? And of course, I promise you, we're not going to be waiting until next year again to start carnival coverage. Hopefully, the CEO and others may, whenever they grace the Bob report, we hope to ask them about the postmortem that they promised last year and other issues. But over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Well, like I said, it was a wonderful climax. Hats off to the RGPF for keeping the peace. And congratulations, not just to the winners, because people have to win, but to the participants, the people who toil year after year to ensure that we have a wonderful carnival season. The local wire benders, the Andre Gavi, and those who are still keeping that element of it alive. The still band players, the young kids who toil in the band houses. Night after night to ensure that part of the culture is still alive. The Calypsonians who make up the Calypso tents, the artists, the soca artists who start the season, by putting out music very early in May and June and so on. So congratulations to all of the participants. So while there is the wonderful climax at the end, the weekend of Carnival, when it takes a concerted effort to get to that point, and hats off to all who contributed along those lines. We have some work to do, like I said, in terms of the production of events. We have a lot of work to do on the product. We need to work on our traditional aspects, and we need to capitalize on this bump that the all-inclusive bands and fetes are offering to us to attract a new generation of mass players and mass lovers.
Dexter Mitchell, thank you for appearing on the Bob Report this week.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Our viewers and listeners, this has been a conversation we had with Dexter Mitchell concerning Spice Mass 2025 and the conclusion of Spice Mass 2025. Let's take two on that. Viewers and listeners, that was, of course, Dexter Mitchell, who served on the Carnival Committee before it was converted into the Spice Mass Corporation. Of course, he's also the founder of the Made in Grenada Festival, and he was able to give us a quick postmortem with respect to the conclusion of Spice Mass 2025. I personally had a great time for Carnival this year. For those of you who saw me reveling on the road, it was great seeing all of you. And of course, this, in fact, was to me a very bumper Carnival season. But as we go to the break, I do want to shout out two young men that I met in Grenada over the course of my time there over the last 3 weeks. One, Quincy Donald, and Christopher Alexis. Both of you gentlemen belong to the class of 2013 of the illustrious Presentation College, our alma mater. You guys do great work in Grenada in respect of your professional fields, but you're also avid viewers of the Bob Report. So I certainly want to thank you for watching the program. And please, you guys are from a younger generation of Grenadians. So I'm hoping the challenge I'm issuing to you young men, Quincy and Christopher, is that you use that opportunity afforded to you to also spread the word of the Bob Report to members of your generation, because you have the type of intellect and type of thoughtfulness that I believe you have the capacity to be able to share the program to a younger audience, because of course our audience tends to skew a bit more mature, but certainly with people like yourself watching the program, we hope that we can be able to reach a younger audience. Of course, one of the things that we intend to do as well is to look into having Bob Report content on the TikTok platform, because that's where a lot of you young people live as well. So folks, what we're going to do now is to take a quick break and come back with the second segment of this week's program. Again, as a reminder, this week's program is not live as I am still traveling, but notwithstanding that I'm still traveling, the Bob Report will be a mainstay of your Sunday morning. So please stay tuned for the second segment of the program.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bob Report. And of course, this is the second segment of the program. Now, last week, the right-wing regime in Washington, D.C., through its Secretary of State Rubio, followed through on their plan earlier this year to punish countries that benefit from the Cuban medical mission program, including Grenada. Now, Cuba, under former President Fidel Castro, had a long-standing policy of sending medical brigades to countries in need, based on the principle of socialist solidarity and supporting revolutionary movements. This included Grenada, especially after the 1979 revolution led by late Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, which saw a shift towards closer ties with Cuba and the Soviet Union between 1979 and 1983. Now, Grenada and Cuba established diplomatic relations on the 14th of April, 1979, 1 month after the triumph of the Grenada Revolution. Now, since that time, Cuba has provided technical assistance in sectors such as education, health, fisheries, agriculture, construction, sports, and many other areas of national development. Also, several Grenadian students received and continue to receive scholarships to study in Cuba. Now, in the area of medical support, Cuba assisted and continues to assist Grenada, or at least assisted Grenada rather, with the construction of the current General Hospital in St. George, as well as the provision of medical personnel to staff a very under-resourced public healthcare infrastructure in Grenada. Now, history would record that it was Dr. Keith Mitchell, former Grenadian Prime Minister, who showed up the current diplomatic relations between Cuba and Grenada by paying an official visit to the island following his 1995 victory at the polls. And since then, Grenada and Cuba has continued the relationship, that is, a strong relationship between these two countries has continued under subsequent administrations. So the medical missions that Cuba has with other countries is not new. What is new, however, is an administration in Washington who are now finding ways of increasing pressure on Cuba in one of the only ways the country is able to raise revenue in the face of a historic and illegal trade embargo placed on Cuba in the 1960s by Democratic President at the time, John F. Kennedy. Now, here to discuss the sanctions against Grenada, that's the visa sanctions against Grenada, are of course Dr. Terence Marichal, who is a Cuban-trained physician, as well as Dr. Justin Pear, who is a labor market consultant, and Chester Humphrey, who is also a former trade unionist, a former president of the Technical and Allied Workers Union, but still a trade unionist for life, I'm sure, and a current labor consultant. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report.
Thank you, Kalan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely. Now, gentlemen, I want to kick off this conversation with you, Dr. Marichal, and react to the visa sanctions that Cuba has announced to impose on Grenada, even though the government of Grenada has indicated that they have not received any official word from the U.S. government. Of course, we know how this administration in Washington communicates. They communicate via tweets and social media statements. Now, react to those sanctions in the context of what we're discussing today.
Well, let me say first of all that it is just totally ridiculous in this day and age that this politics of coercion can continue like this, because Grenada is a sovereign country. And as you mentioned in your introduction, Grenada has had a long-standing relationship with Cuba since the triumph of the revolution in 1979. And Cuba has provided this assistance consistently, even at a time when they were unceremoniously kicked out of Grenada after the invasion in 1983. Cuba still continued to provide scholarships and assistance, even through the party that I headed at the time, the Maurice Bishop Patriotic Movement. So they always continued to provide that level of solidarity with the Grenadian people. And to come in this day and age, after so many years of this distinguished and checkered relationship between Grenada and Cuba, to now characterize that relationship as, human trafficking, and nothing can be more ridiculous than that in this day and age. First of all, it's a violation of the UN Charter, which all of us as countries belong to. It's an interference in our internal affairs. First of all, to meddle in something like that is not their business. the kind of relationship that Grenada has with Cuba, whether it is in medicine or in any other sphere. We are all independent countries and we have a right to establish relationships as we see fit. Now, this politics of bullying, which is what is characterized in the Trump administration, is something that really, really everybody should take note of. And what they're trying to do is just little by little pick off little countries like Grenada because they know that, we're vulnerable and, they can do stuff like that and get away with it. But that's all they're really trying to do, to just bully people. And, they strip Cuba of just about everything that you can strip Cuba of in the last, particularly in the last 10 years. The number of sanctions on top of the already brutal criminal blockade that they have imposed on Cuba, the number of sanctions under the first Trump administration and then under the Biden administration, over 230 new sanctions. I mean, how much more can a country endure after 60 years of this nonsense, And then on top of that, the last vestige of solidarity that it can still provide to countries like ours, they're trying to destroy that as well. I mean, enough is enough. When is it going to stop? I just find that something has to be done. I mean, I don't know what can be done, but Cuba has enjoyed enough, and it's time for that nonsense to stop.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to Mr. Humphrey. I think we lost Mr. Humphrey, but Dr. Pear, we have you here. I suspect that your theory of the case here is coming from a different perspective. So in this opening salvo, again, the whole question of human trafficking, I've never heard that angle before until Marco Rubio raised this. That's the U.S. Secretary of State, because that Cuban medical mission program has been in existence for decades. This is not something that the Cuban government started yesterday, right? This is something that has always been there. Now, so let us talk. Let's hear your perspective on this.
Okay then. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here, Dr. Mary Shaw, Comrade Chester Humphrey, and to the Grenadian and international audience. As I said, I'm a Grenadian citizen. We grew up in the time of the revolution. We have full support of the Cuban, what they have done for us. And, I would obviously like Grenada to continue the pleasant relationship with Cuba. Cuba has done a lot for Grenada. Okay. So, but I just want to take a different perspective here. You remember that in May 21st, 2004, Grenada acceded to something called the Palermo Protocol. It signed this issue of their human trafficking. Okay, I just wanted to just be aware of that. So I just want to say that the Cuban international mission has always been a cornerstone. Okay, it has been a cornerstone. It has operated since the 1960s. To date, over 600,000 Cubans have been on these missions in over 160 countries. So this program has been very, very, very good for most of the region and the world. Cuba works in Latin America, Africa, and some of the oceanic countries. So, as many people may know that our firm, we conducted maybe one of the largest human trafficking study in the Caribbean. So there's a CARICOM and the European Union sponsored the program. So we look at the whole issue about human trafficking in the Caribbean region. And what I want to say might be a little, as I said, might be not what the normal Grenadian may want to hear. So let's look at what is happening. So according to the United Nations said that around 30,000 Cuban doctors are actively now in about 67 countries. What we see that from 1960 to 2025, the program has taken a steady decline from I said about 600,000 people. In 2025, the Cuban medical program had about 50,000. Sorry, 2015, 50,000, and now it's under 28,000. So it's getting less and less. One of the, as I said, on average, about 3,300 Cuban doctors go abroad every year on this medical mission. So the issue about Grenada, the issue about the Cuban, revolve around the international issue of human trafficking and combating human trafficking. So what I'll do, I'll just give us a simple definition of what human trafficking is. So according to the United Nations, human trafficking involves the recruitment, transportation, harboring, and or exercising control, direction, or influence over the movements of persons in order to exploit that persons, typically through sexual exploitation or forced labor. Okay, that is according to the United Nations. So the US government, okay, applying that definition, the US government argues that the Cuban doctors, when they go abroad, they face heavy restriction and control while they are abroad. So the Cuban medical mission fits into the narrative of what someone will deduce as human trafficking. One of the issues of human trafficking, typically in most human trafficking countries, as I think I mentioned, we did the human trafficking study. We went to 28 countries in the region, and got firsthand information. So in the Cuban medical mission, what happens? You see that most of these persons, their passports are confiscated. They are constantly there is surveillance. Their families are under threat if they defect. But what is most concerned, that when these missions and persons go on the mission, there is always a military attaché that accompanies these people. So in the classical lexicon of human trafficking, this program falls within the confines of what is human trafficking. But let me just give you one, just the whole explanation of what is forced labor.
And yes, I want you to stick a pin there, because I do want to get Chester Humphrey's opening comments to the original question that was posed, and then we'll get back to this substantive point you've raised here. But Mr. Humphrey, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir. And again, the question that I opened this conversation with was just your overall reaction to these sanctions, and whether or not really should the government of Grenada have engaged in more diplomatically tactical moves. Because initially when the announcement was made, or when it was parroted by elements of the administration, the regime, I would not want to call what's happening in Washington administration, that's just a regime. The government of Grenada went ahead to publicly declare, for example, that they're gonna be okay with getting sanctioned. Should they have been more diplomatically tactical? And now that we have this announcement here.
Well, just let me say one quick thing, is that because I had to switch instruments.
Yes.
Because for some reason the internet on my computer, I was not hearing and I was buffering all the time. I missed almost all of what Dr. Pierre has said. Mm-hmm. And that has put me at a disadvantage.
But we will get back. We will get back to that. Yes.
Yeah, but just let me say this straight up. This position adopted by the United States has nothing to do with the realities of life. This is a political, ideological decision taken by the United States. It's not based on any objective truth. Yeah, it's based simply on narrow political considerations, playing to the gallery of the voting power of the Cuban immigrant community, concentrated mainly in one state, namely the state of Florida. And that is what this is all about. It's about an attempt.
I think we lost Senator Humphrey again. But let me bring you back, Dr. Marisho, here to pick up on what Mr. Humphrey was saying here about this is
Hello,
all about.
I'm hearing you, so
yes.
I don't know.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead, please, Mr. Humphrey. Go ahead. We can hear you now. Oh, we lost him again. But Dr. Marisho, please pick up on that question of this is about domestic politics in the U.S. in the context of, again, the Cuban expat community in Florida, of which Marco Rubio belongs.
But there's always been like that. I mean, Marco Rubio is a known anti-Cuban. I mean, he's professed anti-Cuban and one who was dedicated his entire political career to just fighting down Cuba. He's known for that. And it's not surprising that since he became the foreign minister, that he has not lost a single minute in trying to push almost anything that he can push, as he has done when he was in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to try and bring Cuba down. This is nothing new, and what Chester is saying is completely true. It's explained to an audience of people, Cuban immigrants in the Florida area, who are, opposed to the Cuban regime and who would like to see nothing better than the downfall of Cuba and the socialist system that exists in Cuba at this point in time. So it is nothing new. And to characterize something like medical assistance, going to countries and help people survive, saving lives, to be even characterized even remotely as human trafficking is totally absurd. I don't care what articles Mr. Pierre can bring and justify that this is human trafficking. This is the worst example of human trafficking I've ever seen. People are going to save lives in other countries. Cubans are patriots. They love their country.
These
are internationalists as well. They go to other countries and help other countries. And you could make a case for coercion and force and all of that, but they have been doing that for all these years, and it's not a problem. When they went to Italy recently, you didn't hear anything during the COVID time about that,
Well, I will be raising the Italy question specifically with Dr. Pear, but Mr. Humphrey, we have you back, so please continue. Oh, we lost you again, but we will continue this conversation, gentlemen, on the whole question of human trafficking. But Dr. Marisho, I want you to specifically raise the concerns or some of the conclusions that Dr. Pear has arrived at here. He speaks of the whole question of, the medical professionals not having access to their passports, not having minders follow them. Then there's also the question of their salaries, with respect to how much of their salaries is taken from them and sent back to Cuba as a means of course, earning revenue for the state of Cuba, given the fact that there is a trade embargo in place. So let us speak to those specific issues. And of course, the reality is Cuba is a communist country. Let us be real about this. It's not necessarily a case where Cuba, it's a case where, for example, here in the context of democratic and free societies in most of the Caribbean, we are free to criticize the government without threats of being put in some prison or the other. So let us pick up on those issues of personal liberties and freedoms of the medical professionals.
Well, first of all, I'm sure all of the Cuban personnel, before they are sent to any country, they are made aware of all of the conditions that will exist. They're not forcibly sent there. Cubans are known to be internationalists. they not only just save lives, they have gone to places like Angola, Mozambique, South Africa, and have fought wars against, the apartheid regime and all of that. So it's not about just, going there and under pressure. This is Cuba's system. Their system is one about solidarity. The same thing that probably China does and other countries do, who have a similar system. Now, if they go to a country and they're expected to stay in that country and provide that help, you don't expect them to defect. But when you create conditions as harsh as the United States has created for Cubans in Cuba, and even today, it's not just the blockade. If you talk about the countless sanctions and more sanctions, all aim to bring down the Cuban regime. And the last little vestige of solidarity that they can render to other struggling countries, and even to get a little bit of remuneration for it. What is so wrong with that? What, you want to have nothing at all? They must not survive at all? You just do anything you want to do to them and they must not look for ways of survival? Come on. How do we characterize something as saving lives and helping people as human trafficking? Come on. It's just a total distortion of what human trafficking is all about.
Yes, Dr. Marshall, stick up in. Mr. Humphrey, the connection seems to have stabilized, so I would invite you to continue, sir.
Well, I listened with deep interest. Dr. Pear's so-called research into Cuba's human trafficking. And he said he did a survey in Caribbean countries. I would like to know which countries he did this survey in, because the Jamaican Prime Minister, the then head of CARICOM, Mia Motley, Ralph Gonzalez, in fact, the entire CARICOM community position, and the Caribbean has a well-noted and distinguished position on labor at the ILO in the Caribbean, with the exception of a few countries, but primarily the Anglophone Caribbean. We have met all of the indices of labor freedoms as set by the ILO, and are in fact higher than that of the United States in many of the indices. And none of these governments have found what Dr. Pear says he has found. I find that to be very interesting and unique, that he has found evidence of human trafficking amongst Cuban professionals. Let me make it absolutely clear, and it is straightforward. Like Dr. Maricho, my daughter is a product of the Cuban medical system. She spent 7 years in Cuba. All right. She's here now practicing medicine. I have Cubans who live here where I live, in some apartments that I have here. We have a nice Cuban community here. They are all part of the exercise. For you to do medicine in St. George's University and to graduate, if you are non-Grenadian, that's $500,000 US. Right now, all of my 3 children, I had to take loans. In fact, I'm paying back a loan now on my last son. The first 2 are medical doctors. And I had to pay. I had to take loans and pay. And as I say, I'm still paying. What is wrong if a state gives you education from birth to the grave, including education in highly specialized fields? Because let me make this point here. The Cuban medical practice, the Cuban medical industry, if you want to call it that, at the level of its competencies, is high and higher even than that in the United States. Take, for example, diabetic amputations. The Cuban medical system has one of the lowest diabetic amputations in the entire world, lower than that even of the United States. What is wrong if the state educates you? What is wrong with you having to pay back some form in the education that you have received? As I said to you, I am still paying back loans that I took for my children from the Caribbean Development Bank. And without those loans, all right, without those loans, both of my children, well, two, because my daughter got a scholarship to Cuba, medicine would have been outside of their reach. How does that amount to? So, am I engaged in human trafficking? So, every Cuban state provides you with high levels of technical education in which you, the individual, will have to find money to do it. And Cuba produces more doctors than are in the entire system of the UN. And this is a third world country with no major amount of natural resources. I mean, I find this so-called finding of Dr. Pierre to be very curious.
Well, yes,
and no other country, including those in Europe, has accused Cuba of human trafficking. Italy came to mind.
Including Italy, of course, because
including Italy.
A lot of
so
yes.
Dr. Pierre, I don't understand. I would really like to spend some more time, because what you are attempting to do, in fact, I was confused. I thought that you were a representative of the U.S. government. Because what you are doing here, Dr. Pierre, is providing an American justification, and you did so without any restraint. You are trying to explain why the Americans have adopted this position, and then you purport to find evidence to support what the Americans are doing. When the whole world knows, Dr. Pierre, I mean, let's be quite blunt, the whole world knows that this is just a contorted lie. Right? This is just the Americans are so concerned about human life. Why are they the right arm of the slaughter that's happening in Palestine? I mean, Dr. Pierre, are you serious, really?
Well, Mr. Humphrey,
intend that you could convince Grenadians that
Comrade Humphrey, let us give him a chance to respond, because you have attempted to make sense of what of his research. Dr. Pierre, this is your opportunity. You've heard from both your colleagues here, Dr. Marshall and Mr. Humphrey. It is now your time. It's your time to justify. Yes, let him speak, please. Yes, go ahead.
Me and Motley supporting human trafficking. I mean, that's what you want me to believe.
Go ahead, Dr. Pierre. Go ahead, Dr. Pierre.
Okay. I think that, thank you very much, Dr. Bob. I think there's a little misunderstanding in terms of what I said, in terms of the understanding of Comrade Humphrey and Dr. Marshall. Okay. In my report, okay, forced labor practices in the English-speaking Caribbean. Okay, it said I just want to quote, in 1919 and 2019, when we conducted the research, we interviewed over 49 Cuban medical workers, including 16 in the Caribbean countries, including Jamaica, Grenada, St. Vincent the Grenadines, Guyana, Trinidad. Mr. Comrade Humphrey, just listen to me, okay?
He's listening.
These
go ahead, please.
Interviews reveal no evidence of violation related to forced labor practices. These findings imply that although coercion and exploitation remains areas of concern in certain international contexts, the circumstances faced by Cuban doctors in the Caribbean appeared to differ notably from those experienced by other colleagues elsewhere. Okay, so this, comrade, is totally different to what you're saying. You're saying that I am saying that there's human trafficking in Cubans doctors. We did not find any evidence of Cubans in the Caribbean experiencing human trafficking, because in the Caribbean, what we see that there are strong labor laws. We interviewed a couple of Cuban, even those in Grenada. They're free to move everywhere. They go anywhere. They have bank accounts. They go on vacation.
But Dr. Pierre, with respect, that is not what you said in the introduction.
What I said,
right? So
there are in certain countries. There are 160 countries. There are certain instances where Cubans doctors and medical practitioners who go abroad, they are subject to harassment. They are subject to this. So they take some of the passport. If you go, let's say, for example, in Venezuela, if you go to Nicaragua, I mean, a lot of countries, lots of evidence. But in our findings in the Caribbean, we could not find any evidence of that. It's not, as I said, our sample frame was small. It was 49 persons. We interviewed them. However, in 160 countries, okay, there's a lot of evidence. Imagine there is also a report by it's called the Prisoners of Cuba report, and they indicated in
who authored that report.
It was done by the government. It was done by the government of Brazil. In fact, there was a big case with the government of Brazil, and they gave evidence, and the government of Brazil changed its position on this issue of human trafficking. Okay, we're not saying that yes, in the Caribbean they have good laws. We were fine, but in other countries there are instances. In Venezuela, for example, we have there are a lot of instances where military attaché accompanied some of their persons said that when they go to these missions, they are subjected to a schedule. Some of them are subjected to a curfew. Yes, these things happen. So okay, for example, from let me just quote the report, the 2019 report by the Cuban prisoners defenders highlights several concerning practices. 89% of those surveyed doctors said that they had no prior knowledge of the specific assignment. 41% reported having their passport confiscated upon arrival. 91% stated that they were under surveillance and were encouraged to inform or spy on others. 57% said that they did not volunteer but felt compelled to participate, while 37% reported significant pressure to accept the assignments. This is public knowledge, okay? And it came out in the evidence in Brazil. The administration characterized this mission as slave labor, citing that the Cuban government practiced retaining up to 75% of the doctor's salary. Okay, I mean, this is public information, is in the court of Brazil, the 2019 case study. And as a result, what has happened, more and more countries have been able to review the Cuban mission. I'm saying that the Cuban mission is very good for the developing countries, but I'm saying in some contexts there are issues with relating to forced labor, because remember that
Dr. Bob,
yes,
please.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey, please.
If I may.
Yes.
If I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, this discussion is about the imposition by the White House in the United States against Grenada's elected officials from traveling, because Grenada is involved in human trafficking of Cuban doctors. This is what I understood this program to be. I don't know, why are we being punished for the crimes of somebody allegedly in Brazil? First of all, we don't even know who the victims in Brazil are. We know nothing about Brazil. So what Dr. Bob is essentially saying now, that he's in reverse gear. All right?
That's Dr. Pear, yes.
In reverse gear. Dr. Pear, sorry.
Yes.
It's saying now that nothing is wrong with the Cuban medical brigade here in Grenada. They're above board. They meet all the international standards. But Grenada is being punished because of some finding in Brazil. I mean, that logic is so totally distorted. I mean, Dr. Pear, are you really serious? We are in no position to challenge your findings that have happened in Brazil or any place else.
No,
We are talking about Grenada is a Caribbean country, right? We are part of CARICOM. We held the chairmanship of CARICOM only recently. Mia Mottley is an internationally distinguished public servant, Prime Minister of the Republic of Barbados. Yeah? And she has defended the Cuban Medical Brigade program. And let me see, Cuba have not just medical persons in Grenada, they have engineers. I have a young Cuban design engineer by me here. And the engineering community in Grenada highly respects the talents of this young man.
Yes.
So much so that he completed his program, went back to Cuba, and the ministry has sought his expertise again. So I am confused why you find it necessary to offer an explanation for the American government.
But listen.
Senator, I don't think he's offering an explanation for the American government.
Well, that's how the program. Well, I said to you from the very beginning that I was disadvantaged. But from what I heard, this presentation was providing a reason why the American government has instituted this sanction against Grenada. And for a moment, I thought he was representing the U.S. government, right? Because I'm saying to you, and then you asked the question of whether or not the government was defective in its. Because I listened to the trike issued recently by one William Joseph, who sued me because I once called him a parasitic technocrat. I listened to that tribe. I am not able to comment on that in any fulfilling way. I know that the government said that there's no human trafficking here. There's no report of human trafficking by Grenada at the ILO or any international body. The Caribbean Congress of Labor, which I administered for 2 successive terms unopposed. The current president of the Caribbean Congress of Labor is Senator Andre Lewis. Nobody here has issued any report of any finding. So this is why I'm saying that I found that Dr. Pear's so-called finding was very curious. And I would like to really have a one-on-one discussion with him. Yeah? Now we are being told about findings in Brazil, when our discussion here is what has been done to Grenada and why. And it's more curious that the why is because something is happening in Brazil. If Grenada has done nothing wrong, then why are we being punished? The government has said it has absolutely no clue as to why the White House has imposed this on Grenada. Ralph Gonsalves was more upfront as a prime minister than Dick Mitchell. Dr. Ralph Gonsalves said, you want to stop me from coming to America? Go ahead, I don't have a problem with that. But I will stand with Cuba. I will not deny my people medical treatment. And he went into all the details. How Cuban doctors here are paid, how medical personnel. Right now, as I speak, I have a Cuban family holidaying in Grenada, living in one of my apartments. And that's the family of a highly specialized Cuban nurse in the field of nephrology, the only such qualified person in Grenada. And several people, the incidence, as Dr. Marshall would tell you, of advanced kidney disease as a result of diabetes in Grenada is very high. So let's stop playing, let's be clear. This is a political game. It has absolutely nothing to do with truth. Right? My daughter spent 7 years in Cuba. Dr. Maricho similarly. And he goes back to Cuba frequently. I know of no, look, the Americans had a position in Cuba that once you land on American soil, whether legally or lawfully, you immediately have a status as a resident. How many Cubans? And you could just go up in Caracol and go through the islands and blah, 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 blah. How many Cubans here have been defected? a so-called defective.
So
Right?
yes, sir.
So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yes.
just utter nonsense.
Mr.
And we
Humphrey, stick
know
a
it's
pin.
a lie. It's
Yes,
a
Mr.
lie of the
Humphrey.
same magnitude that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
Yes,
It's
Mr.
a
Humphrey.
complete
Mr.
lie.
Humphrey. Yes,
It's
absolutely.
a lie. It's a
Mr.
lie
Humphrey.
that the
Mr.
PRG was building its submarine base on the Point Saline airport.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey,
So,
stick a pin. Stick a pin.
Dr.
No.
Dr. Pear, reflect somewhat on the history.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey, please stick a pin because I want to bring back Dr. Marisho here. Dr. Marisho, of course, the next part of this conversation has to do with the bullying tactics of the United States, especially in the context of this regime in Washington. And they may start at these visa restrictions, but it may not end there for Grenada and the other countries that have been targeted. Of course, Dr. Marisho, you've lived in Cuba, you've studied in Cuba, and you've seen the impact of those sanctions. Now, what can Grenada possibly expect to see if, in fact, the United States continues to apply pressure that says, okay, well, you guys don't want to come to the United States after the visa ban? We may say, well, now we're going to do trade sanctions. We may do shipping sanctions, things like that. Dr. Marisho, what say you?
Well, it is all part of that same narrative that is designed to destroy that relationship between Grenada and Cuba and between Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean region.
Right.
The government is being sanctioned right now because of what they call complicity in the Cuban regime medical mission scheme. It's almost as if it is something concocted overnight so that the Cuban regime can exploit their workers, their doctors, and the professionals to survive or even to gain some form of remuneration. Now, we know things are dire in Cuba. Things are really, really, really difficult for the Cuban people at this time. You can't even have the remissions of money again, transfer of cash because they have cut it off. MoneyGram, all of these things, Western Union. You can't. I have friends in Cuba that I would love to help at this point in time who are suffering, who went through the hurricane recently and are totally devastated. They're looking for a little bit of help, and you can't even send a few dollars to them because they've cut off everything as it relates to Cuba now being a member or they have designated as a state sponsor of terrorism, which they know is totally false. So what is the rationale being provided by Dr. Pei at this point in time to justify why the Americans are taking that position? Whether it was this or other rationale, they're going to find something. Because in this day and age, in 2025, to look at the Cuban medical missions that have been stellar in terms of the work that they've been providing throughout the Caribbean and throughout the world, as a matter of fact, to characterize it as human trafficking at this time, it's just another extension of all of the sanctions and all of the problems that have created for the Cuban people to bring the Cuban regime down. They won't stop at anything to do that. And so, whether it is that rationale that they've been providing or that is human trafficking or any other thing, they're going to find more and more. And what it means now is that they are not going to provide okay, they create a void so that Cuban trafficking doesn't continue, quote unquote. Are they going to provide that assistance? Even after Cubans were unceremoniously kicked out of Grenada in 1979, who came back in Grenada and built a hospital for us? The same Cubans. The same Cubans. Did they provide a single hospital for us in Grenada? Did they provide medical personnel to come to Grenada in all of this period of suffering Grenada was undergoing after the Cuban professionals were kicked out of Grenada? And little by little, Cuba is a country that helps third world countries and struggling countries. They still came back after.
Dr. Bob.
Yes,
Dr. Bob,
Mr. Humphrey. Mr. Humphrey wants an intervention. Yes, Mr. Humphrey, you want an intervention. Go ahead.
If I may, because again, I find it curious. How does someone become voluntarily complicit in a scheme designed to obliterate an entire society, how does someone willingly become complicit to provide a rationale for what we all know is a calculated lie? I can't. My mind is struggling with that. With that challenge, I can't understand it. I can't understand it. I mean, it is. I mean, it is clear what the Trump administration is after. It's clear, right? And what is worse, all of this is happening when the world is seeing for the first time live a Holocaust in which the Americans is the right hand of that Holocaust. We are seeing it. We are witnessing it. The mass starvation of a whole people. The bombing. I mean, okay, so the Jews were sent to the gas chamber, a painless death. But now they are bombing men, women, elderly children. Whole towns are being obliterated with the bombs and the protection provided by the United States. And how does a black person, with the history that we've gone through as a people, as a race, as a group, how do we allow ourselves to become complicit in a lie and in an event to cut off the assistance which people have selflessly given and continue to give? When we think about the Cuban Miracle Eye program and the hundreds of Grenadians, I'm talking about hundreds of Grenadians who had this site restored, and there are dozens of Cubans living here. The Cuban community here is large. They're in the restaurant business, right? How do we become complicit in an attempt to dismantle? It's hard. I can't understand.
Well, Mr. Humphrey, you're targeting your ire at Dr. Pehe, but I do want to share.
No. I call no names. I'm just trying to find out how.
But in our own region, and I want to get back to Dr. Pehe on this question, and I will share this article from the Miami Herald. So if you would bear with me, gentlemen, and this would be an interesting test case, because I want to see if Grenada is actually going to follow the Bahamas's bending of the knee here. I would not call it the Bahamas's lead, but let me go ahead and share that article for the benefit of everyone. Let me go ahead and share that now. Just give me 1 second here.
Well, could you summarize the article, because I know the time is short?
Yes.
And I had a lot of problems with my internet here today. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. So essentially, the Bahamian government announced in, I believe it was in March of this year. Well, not March. I think it might have been in May or June of this year, that they are going to start to pay the Cuban workers directly, the Cuban medical professionals directly, as opposed to sending funds directly to the Cuban government. That is an agreement that they entered into with the medical professionals directly. The article isn't loading, as opposed to doing so with the Cuban government. So the point I'm making is that does. May I finish, please, Mr. Humphrey, and then I'll get Dr. Pehe to respond to that as well. Is it not a bit, I suppose, unusual that the Bahamian government, in the case of the Bahamas, that they were not paying these workers directly, and that they were not entering direct contracts with them?
Excuse me. Look, I don't know. I'm not in a position to comment on the specific arrangements between the Bahamian state and the Cuban state. But what I know in Grenada, and I can speak to Grenada, because Grenada is the one that has been singled out and affected so far, right? Cuban doctors have always been paid. Every month they get their salary. In fact, those who live here, and including those who did not live here, come to me, because to set up a bank account in Grenada is a fairly elaborate something. And they would come to me for me to sign forms. I will have to provide my electricity bill and my water rate bill so that they could fill out the banking forms and so on. And they send the money to and forth and back and forth to Cuba and so on. But the specifics of the relations between different states is the right between different states, right? But we are not talking about the sanctions imposed on the Bahamas. Grenada has always been paying the Cuban personnel directly. They receive the salaries just like any typical Grenadian public servant. And the issue that we are discussing is that Grenada now, officials have been sanctioned. So let's not just be jumping all over the place. Let's be focused. Because what the Bahamas may have done last year is what Grenada has been doing from day one. Yet, we are being sanctioned and nobody else. So there must be an obvious reason. There must be some specific reason, which we don't know, because according to the current government, they have no explanation so far as to why this was done to Grenada, right? Minister Cornwall was on the television, and I salute him and I applaud him, and he made it clear. If the consequences of maintaining relations with Cuba is that the Americans will take away my visa, I have no difficulty or challenge with that, right? I have no challenge with that, yes? So take away my visa, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a Cuban, I'm the beneficiary of Cuba's educational training program. I'm a qualified economist. I worked in one of the leading regional economic institutions, right? And I'm now the Minister of Finance. And from my personal experience, I will not. And he has made that clear. So let's do this quick summary. Grenada has not been involved in human trafficking. There are no signs of human trafficking here. The Grenada Trade Union Movement, which is a very powerful organization in this country, has no evidence before it, nor has it released any evidence or complaint. The ILO, to which Grenada returned this year, when Labour Minister Senator Claudia Joseph led a delegation to the ILO meeting, has no report before it on Grenada being involved in human trafficking. Right? In my 40 years as a trade unionist, right? And in my 25 or how much years as a senior member of the TUC, we have received no report from the ILO office in Trinidad, right? In fact, we have met the best practices of the ILO. There have been no reports of human trafficking. There have been no reports of child labor in Grenada. So then why have the Americans applied this to us? And Dr. Pei, I'm still curious as to your explanation. Because essentially what you are saying, the reason why we are being sanctioned is because somebody in somewhere in Brazil or some other place commits some injurious, inhumane act. That can't make sense to me.
Let me bring in Dr. Pei here. Dr. Pei, of course, you've heard the responses to your theory of the case here. Of course, I've also raised the question of what happened. And again, with this current administration in Washington, quite frankly, there is no rhyme or reason with a lot of what is done in respect to foreign policy. But we do know that a bully carries a big stick, and that has always been a big stick policy throughout. You've had the Monroe Doctrine, you've had Manifest Destiny, you've had all of that. You've had several invasions, destabilizing actions. We saw what happened in Chile with the rise of Pinochet and American involvement there. So many issues that the U.S. is engaged in, and this might be another example. So, Dr. Pei, I want you to speak to the concerns that both Dr. Marichaud and Mr. Humphrey have raised in respect to your theory of the case.
Right. Good. Thank you very much. Yes, as I said in my introduction, I said, obviously, I'm a Grenadian. We grew up in the days of the revolution, so we, as we have some certain, we have a bond with the Cuban government, the Cuban regime. Okay, as a Pan-Africanist, Cuba has never enslaved us, so So
or invaded us.
They've never enslaved us
in 1983.
So I'm coming from this viewpoint, okay? And despite how we feel, yes, we are all in support of the Cuban government. They have done tremendous work for the government of Grenada. As I said before, from our research, we found no evidence of Cuban doctors or Cuban medical persons being, deprived or human trafficking or forced labor. That is in terms of Grenada, in terms of our finding. There was no report of that. What the issue is, as I said, I'm black, so I'm no supporter of the US in any case. But we have to understand that the whole governing principle has to do with the issue, the UN issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking is an international, crime. Okay, forced labor is an international crime, and if a country does not practice it in one country and practices it in another, they are also liable. And I think is that what the UN, the United States is focusing on. I'm not a consultant to either the United States or government of Grenada, but I'm just looking at it from this perspective of someone who has studied the subject. Okay, the Global Association of Human Trafficking Scholars, there was an issue that came up there. The whole issue of if these Cuban doctors are subjected to certain violations under the United States human traffic, the definition of human trafficking. One, the confiscation of passports. Two, the issue of forced labor, having been surveilled constantly. Some of them have a curfew. And it goes on and on and on. And when you look at that, you see that if in one case, if there are a violation, if there's a violation in one case, there will be it's a violation. And in my opinion, as I said, I'm not speaking on behalf of the United States government or any government, but in terms of having an academic understanding of the whole issue of forced labor, okay, of forced migration. There is the issue of the issue of human trafficking is blatant, is evidence with regard to some of the missions of the human or of the Cuban government. And I said that the Cuban government, they have done in many countries, over 100 countries, 600,000 persons, but the government itself brings in lots of money every year as a part of that, because when you work as a Cuban doctor, your salary does not come to you. What the U.S. state, what the U.S. is saying.
Well, Mr. Humphrey, let him finish, please.
What the U.S. is saying, that what the program should be like, if a medical doctor works in a Cuban medical doctor goes to Grenada and work and get his full salary, that should be standard all over the world. And in many cases,
but Dr.
Let me just ask something. Let me ask something, Dr. Pierre. I don't know what you're talking about getting full salary or whatever. I've just told you that in educating my children into tertiary level and even at primary school, because all my kids went to private school, never been to a government supported school. And I had to take out a loan. Right? And my loans, the money came from my salary and went straight to the bank. How does that amount to me trafficking my children?
Let him finish, Mr. Humphrey. Let him finish, Mr. Humphrey. Let him finish.
It's totally different. It's totally different. What has happened when the Cuban medical person, let's say go to Nicaragua, Venezuela, all these other countries, they do not get the government, in most cases, the receiving government pays the Cuban government. And this is where the issue lies.
Hold on, Mr. Humphrey. Mr. Humphrey, hold on, Dr. Marichaud, an intervention from you. Go ahead, Dr. Marichaud.
What is the problem with that? if two countries decide that this is an arrangement they are going to engage in.
But Dr. Marisho, Dr. Marisho, the problem here is the garnishing of free labor of
No,
the
but
citizens of
no,
Cuba.
No, Dr. Bob, Dr. Bob, Dr. Bob, Dr. Bob,
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Dr. Bob, yeah, right. So I want to be the devil. I want to confront the devil.
Let me just have a few words.
Hold on. Let's get Dr. Marisho in, please. Go ahead, Dr. Marisho.
To characterize the Cuban thing as the Cuban medical mission as a scheme, first of all, and to compare it with forced labor. I mean, the U.S. authority has no moral authority to speak about forced labor. Look at the prison industrial complex in the United States. There's nothing worse than that. I mean, black people in the United States that is what you call forced labor. That is and to compare forced labor in the prison industrial complex in the United States to what is taking place with
Dr. Bob.
doctors.
Hold on, Mr. Humphrey. Let Mr. Dr. Marisho finish, please.
Going to other countries and providing humanitarian assistance, I mean, it's so ridiculous when you think of it, that a government that engages in human trafficking in the same way, because what they're doing is just taking mostly black people, herding them into prisons and forcing them to work to provide money for private organizations. I mean, the whole prison system in the United States is pretty much privatized now. And you have a government sending their workers, their professionals, provide humanitarian assistance to other countries, irrespective of how they arrange it. Well, that's their business. How does that become, forced labor?
But remember that.
I want to follow up,
and then Dr. Peyo come in.
From Dr. Marisho. I want to follow up from Dr. Marisho on this example. So, I want a motor car, and I go to the bank to borrow some money. And the bank say, okay, no problem, but I need a salary assignment. How am I being, and I don't get my full salary. All I get is, after whatever deductions are made, I get what is left. That's the same thing that is happening with Cuba in some countries. The arrangement is between, remember the Cuban state. The Cuban state spends enormous amounts of money training highly specialized people. What is wrong and what is unusual and what is different from what we do here in Grenada, in which you go to work, there's an arrangement between the two countries, right? And for the state to recover, in the same way as the bank is recovering the money which it lent me to educate my children, there's nothing wrong with that. Is there something wrong with that? If there's something wrong with that, then I could see something being wrong with whatever arrangement two states make. So I train you to be a highly specialized individual. We have an arrangement where you will go overseas to work. I will be paid for that provision, and from that I will pay you. What's different from what I've just explained that has happened to me? That I had to go to the bank to borrow money, and I have to pay the bank back every month, so I don't get my full salary. Part of my salary go to service the money that I borrowed from the bank. What am I doing is different from what the Cubans are doing.
Good. And on that point,
how does that different?
Yes, Mr. Humphrey, let Dr. Peyo respond to both of your interventions here. So Dr. Peyo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. Thank you, Dr. Peyo. What you have just described, Comrade Humphrey, is the same reason what the United States and the international agencies are saying. Because you have to look at human.
Mr. Humphrey, let him finish, please. Let him finish.
Human trafficking. The definition: human trafficking involved the recruitment, transportation, harboring, and/or exercising control, or influence over the movement of a person in order to exploit that person, typically through sexual exploitation or forced labor. Okay. So what is happening when these Cuban? It's true that the Cuban government help these people, they educate them. But what we're saying, according to the United States, or what we're saying, is that when these people go abroad, okay, in most cases, the passports are being confiscated. They are being restricted from movement. There are being consequences on the family abroad if they defect. They are when most cases when a Cuban doctor or a mission goes abroad, there is a military attaché that goes with them to follow them. And in many cases, there are
you have met those attachés? Is there one in Grenada? Where we?
Mr. Humphrey, let him cite the research that he has, please. Please, Mr. Humphrey.
It is that, it is, that's what takes place. It's very so this is what so that's a concern that these governments have. And when, as I said, that the forced labor, there's an issue with forced labor. You will know that the United Nations Convention, 1930 number 20, number 29 says that that any work exerted under threat or penalty or for a person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily. And you know that many of the Cuban doctors said that they were not aware of the position. They cannot leave. They do not have the free will to travel to do anything. Okay, but in other countries, however I mentioned, within the Caribbean, we found no evidence of that. We found no evidence of in instances that apply, let's say in Nicaragua, Brazil, Venezuela, some of these other countries apply in the English-speaking Caribbean. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it does not apply everywhere. But I'm saying that there is an issue with this whole. Why would the Cuban government take someone's passport? It's just similar to when a person is trafficked. Then you have a stable in the Caribbean, for example. There are maybe 83 brothels in the Caribbean. Most of these people, their passports are confiscated. And this is the issue.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey, quickly, yes, and then we have to get on to another theme before we close this conversation. Go ahead.
But in which countries have you researched where these passports of Cuban professionals are taken? Because you say it doesn't happen in the Caribbean.
Brazil, Nicaragua.
You did your research. You did your research and got the evidence in Brazil.
And international.
Now I'm asking you. You did your research, took you to Brazil, and you found that.
As I mentioned before, we did the research in the English-speaking Caribbean.
And it does not exist in the English-speaking Caribbean. Is what
you're saying. Right. But you say it exists. So I'm asking you, on what basis you have come to the conclusion that it exists in the other regions? Did you do your research there? What is the evidence you have? I know what you're saying. You're saying that the passports are taken, and I'm asking you, well, where? Under the former president in Brazil, a Trumpite, who is now facing prison because of his mutiny and so on. That's what you're talking about. Where the evidence that you are talking about, where you procure that evidence from?
Okay. I just want to tell you, that when you conduct a research, there is something called desk review. So you have to do a certain level of desk review to collaborate what you're seeing, to collaborate what looking at the trend. And in our case, we looked at all of the reviews, all of the peer reviews, all of the journals, and to see what has been taking place, because there are studies everywhere. And do
you have any reports from from the ILO on what you're talking about? Is there any documented case before the ILO or any of its tribunals that you have secured information from? Okay. And you could point me at that, so I could satisfy myself that what you are saying. So you may be just regurgitating a lie. Well, you may just be, which is I suspect the case. Okay.
If you say
your so-called desk reviews, because the internationally recognized bodies that deals with these things, you have not pointed a single report from the International Labour Organization, which charges Cuba with human trafficking.
Right. So
you in this program here, you have not referred us to a single report.
Listen, okay. What I think that what you say, I don't know everything. You don't know everything. What you say, I can say the same thing about you.
No, I'm asking you. I'm only asking questions. I'm not. I'm not revealing my conclusions. I'm just asking you because you're making these sweeping conclusions. And when I ask you any evidence of it, you dancing all over the place.
What I'm saying is that the Cuban mission is it over in the last since 1960, over 600,000 persons have visited over 160 countries. The program has been good, okay? But what I'm saying that there are instances where persons who go on these missions, Cuban doctors or Cuban medical persons who go on these missions are subjected to issues relating to human trafficking and forced labor. And for example, Brazil had a very famous case that the court is involved. There's evidence from the court that would say that it's public knowledge. Nicaragua, Bolivia, many of the countries in where labor laws are not as strong as those in the Caribbean. Okay, Cambodia, Vietnam, many of the other countries. I'm not saying that as I said, in our research, we did not find any of the instances where there was human trafficking or forced labor in the Caribbean.
Okay? And let us stick a pin there because we are belaboring this, and we do have to move on here and treat with this other issue. And Dr. Marish, I want to start with you on this question. Now, the government of Grenada entered a relationship recently with the Mount Sinai Hospital in the United States over Project Polaris. Now, there are concerns, and I've raised those concerns too, with the project sponsor, Ms. Andrea Sen Bernard, as well as the consultant, Mr. Damian Dolland, over the potential impact that such a relationship will have in the context of the Cuban medical professionals that are already assigned to work in Grenada's healthcare system. And that concern, Dr. Maricho, has to do with restrictions that Cuban medical professionals have, or American companies rather, have with working alongside anyone who is associated with Cuba or the Cuban regime. Now, do you believe that in and of itself, that arrangement that the government of Grenada entered into with Project Polaris and the arrangement that we currently have with Cuba sort of perhaps raise the profile of Grenada to the United States so that they're making those connections there? And are you concerned at all of that arrangement that Grenada entered into with Mount Sinai?
I am concerned about it. As a matter of fact, I'm even very much concerned about the whole project in and of itself. Mm-hmm. I don't know that attempting a project of the magnitude that Grenada is entering into at this present time, whether we are in a position to really handle that project. I don't know that even Mount Sinai coming in and help us, which probably may help in some ways, but I see also the Cuban mission being marginalized if this comes about. As I said, I have concerns about the totality of this project because I believe that in our present situation we can barely handle what we have. Mm-hmm. We have a healthcare system that is in shambles at this present time. And only because of the real impact that the Cubans are having on Grenada right now in the health system, that we are able to at least keep our head above water. If it weren't for the Cubans operating in Grenada, I don't know where we would have been today. And as I said, I don't see any real assistance coming in. I hear about advisors from Mount Sinai, but I don't see real concrete assistance. I don't see personnel, specialists, the kinds of things that we need right now to push that system forward. coming on stream anytime soon. You know, it's a lot of talk, but in reality, in a practical way, the people who have helped us and continue to help us are the Cuban professionals. And attempting a project like, you know, this one that is coming on stream, or I hear coming on stream, I have serious doubts about it, and I have serious, you know, reservations about how we are going to be able to provide the kind of assistance to the Grenadian people when a big project like that comes on stream. When with our present system, we are hardly able to do that. Where are we going to get the personnel from? Who's going to staff that facility? How are we going to be able to fund it? Again, the only people I see coming to our assistance in a project like that, that won't be, you know, taxing us with a lot of, you know, exorbitant costs are the same Cubans. You know, when you transfer in the kind of system that you have now to Mount Sinai and to the Americans, we are going to be basically following the American model, where, you know, it's extremely expensive to provide healthcare to the Grenadian people. I don't know if it's going to be targeting ordinary Grenadians, or it's going to be targeting the Grenadians who are well-to-do and rich, because I don't see us being able to afford it as ordinary Grenadians. And then secondly, I'm hearing about Africans coming in. Well, I don't have a problem with that, because I'm a Pan-Africanist as well, and I welcome the fact that you know, Nigerians can come and work in Grenada, but I'm sure Nigerians are not coming to work in Grenada for the same salaries that Cubans are coming to work in Grenada for. You know, so we have a lot of doubts about this. There's a lot of more, I think, more questions than answers at this point in time. But I'd like to hear our government officials really seriously address how we are going to. Well, I understand some funding is coming from the African banks, but how we are going to, you know, find the kinds of personnel, real specialists and so on, that are going to be needed for a facility of that nature. When we're going to find them, how we're going to find them, how we're going to pay them, all of these things I think need to be clarified before, you know, we just embrace this project as something that is going to come on stream and is going to just transform the medical system in Grenada. I have my doubts about it.
Mr. Humphrey, same question, the question of the Project Polaris and the potential of sort of a doubling of sanctions.
I will simply begin my response to pointing to a very informative, simple story that Dr. Marisho and myself, and could be Dr. Pear, but Dr. Pear is much younger than all of us, that we once read in a text that all students read, the Royal Reader, called The Dog, the Shadow, and the Bone. The Grenadian population, including myself, and I would consider myself to be amongst the well-read, know very little about this project. I mean, Dr. Marisho is a distinguished physician, all right, have provided and continues to provide exceptional service to the healthcare of ordinary Grenadians and other Grenadians. And he himself isn't clear on what this project is all about. We hear lots of money being talked about. We don't know. We inherited a socialized medical system from the British. We now seem to be migrating towards an American financing-based kind of. So we don't know. This thing has not really been explained. So nobody really knows what's happening outside of some grand pronouncements. So unfortunately, I can't comment very much on it. I have heard the concerns of people in the professional field and so on. All right. The other issue is this. There will be an ILO labor-related issue because the laws in Grenada, right, speak to that question. So if you bring in Nigerian specialists and you pay them at a level higher than is being paid to the Cuban doctors, is an answerable case of a justifiable grievance that could be brought to a court of law. And I will find a way to go to a court, because there is a basic fundamental human rights industrial issue, which is under the UN Convention 100, equal pay for work of equal value. So if you bring in specialists from Nigeria, you cannot pay them more than you pay the Cuban specialists who are here. And if you're paying the Nigerians more, then you have to raise the pay of those of Cuba. And I will be actively involved in that case because the Grenadian law, I think is section 17, I think, of the Employment Act. I don't have my law before me, but I think it is, speaks to the question of equal pay for work of equal value. So you have that issue to deal with. And that's an unfolding issue, which I say I'm paying particular attention to. So I don't know. I can't speak much about this, what you call it, Polaris? Well, I know Polaris is a class of American submarines. So I don't know if the name portends something which should concern us. So I don't know if this project, by its very name, is expected to go underwater, because that's what a submarine does. So we will see. We will see what happens.
Yeah, gentlemen, certainly this has thrust Grenada into the spotlight. We do have to get to the next segment. But let us go over, Dr. Pear, to you for some closing comments here in respect of how Grenada should treat with this. Again, we are dealing with, Maurice Bishop said that, Grenada is in nobody's backyard. But the reality is Grenada is in the backyard of the United States. And the United States is able to exert its power economically, politically, militarily, strategically, and otherwise. In fact, we have been hearing that they are drawing up plans to now invade Mexico. They want to annex Greenland. I mean, they invaded Grenada in 1983. So they do have leverage that they can use to squeeze little Grenada of 100,000 people in respect of this matter. So moving forward, Dr. Pear, if you were to advise the government of Grenada, what advice would you give them? Should we, I do not want to simplify this down to just, ending our long-standing and historic relationship with the government and people of Cuba. I personally think that would be sacrilege, given the historic relationship that we have with Cuba. But in this current, very volatile, very sort of just frenetic American sort of geopolitical environment, what advice would you give the government at this time to treat with this?
Thank you. Well, yes. If I had to advise the government, I believe that when the government make decisions, I believe that a lot of advice should be considered. I think I've mentioned that there was this issue with when the government deported some Haitians, okay? And I was one of those persons who felt that the government should not have done that. So I think that the government or everybody, they do not know everything. So and when they make decisions, they should maybe get a team. And I'm always concerned about who are the persons who advises the government. I think I've said that maybe about since 2022. We want to know these people should be public, because we cannot expect the minister or the prime minister or whoever who make the decision. It should not be unilaterally. So I do not know if Mr. Cornwall or Minister Andel made those decisions unilaterally, or they met as a caucus for advice. So I believe that the government should really sit down and really have advice. I believe, for example, that the great government of Grenada, obviously the government cannot really, disband with this Cuban medical program, because this medical program has been beneficial to Grenada, okay, than in any other form of medical program that maybe the U.S. has given to Grenada. So the Cuban is a staple in Grenada, so it should not be abandoned. However, we will asking the government to reach out and try to enter into some type of negotiation with the American government. Okay, and I believe that if the government maybe reach out to the diplomatic channels, remember that we have our trade missions in there. A lot of important, organizations are stationed in the United States. So the U.S. is a pivotal role, plays a pivotal role in Grenada's development, and we should really take cognizance of that. Negotiate with the government. And I think that the U.S. government, if we do that, find out the best way. But also, Grenada does not have an issue with regard to the U.S. with the Cuban government, because we found no evidence that the government of Grenada violated any laws. So the Grenada doesn't have to do anything, because the Cuban government is paid equally. So that's all. Negotiate with the government and get the solution.
Well, how about the United States provides the same level of human resource capacity that Cuba provides? In the same way that Cuba actually provided human resource capacity in the aftermath of Katrina, when America's own government refused to come to the aid of American citizens, Black American citizens, in New Orleans following Katrina. It was the Cubans who actually supported Americans, victimized Americans from that hurricane in that process. But I was just going to put that out there. Dr. Marisha, over to you, sir. How should the government treat with this? I mean, you've lived in Cuba. You've seen how tough the United States sanctions are in Cuba and how it has crippled and continues to cripple the Cuban economy.
Well, I think the Grenadian government should stand their ground, as far as I'm concerned, because there's no way they should abandon the Cuban medical mission, because we're not doing anything wrong. We must know that we're also dealing with an unusual government in the United States, a government that it's a bully government. It's a government of coercion. But history must also be instructive to us, because you must remember, between 1979 and 1983, when we did not receive one single cent of help from the United States, that Grenada was able to develop in unprecedented ways that we had never seen before, prior to the revolution and even after that. We were able to survive. And remember, the world is changing. What we're seeing right now, the actions of the United States are the actions of a dying empire, because right now we have been this realignment of forces in the world. We see BRICS coming on stream. Cuba is going to be part of, is already part of BRICS, and with all the pressure that Cuba is facing right now, little by little, all of that is going to change as far as the BRICS countries are concerned. So we just have to stand our ground. If the United States is willing and ready to provide the kind of assistance that the Cubans are providing, in fact, they really should be doing that after they invaded our country. They have not done anything for us in a significant way since 1983 to now. And as we mentioned before, even after they kicked the Cubans out, why weren't they criticizing the fact that the Cubans came right here again and built a hospital for us, which they should have done for us, not the Cubans, and still continue to provide that assistance for the last 20, 30 years, in an unselfish way, in true solidarity. That's what real solidarity is all about. And all of their actions right now are just geared towards, putting that final nail in the coffin, because they figure that they have reached the point where they've destroyed Cuba so much that things are so difficult in Cuba that they have to strip away, as I said, the last vestige of solidarity that they could provide to the rest of the Caribbean, which really they shouldn't be doing at this stage because of how difficult it is in Cuba right now. But they still find a way to help us in a way that the United States have never helped us. And I think, we just have to stand our ground. I don't think, having this ability to go to the United States is any, big feather in our cap. So I think Cornwall and Andal and all of these guys, the government itself, Ralph Gonzalez, all of the leaders of the region, must stand their ground. And I think little by little, that's what they try to do, pick off one by one. So they start with Grenada, and then they're going to start picking off somebody else. They started probably with the one that they consider as the most vulnerable. But we have to have a Caribbean voice in all of this, and Grenada should not be alone in all of this. We should meet with the rest of the Caribbean, with CARICOM, and have a united position on this problem and present that position to the United States that what is happening here is not human trafficking. It's humanitarian assistance that the Cubans have been provided for decades, and we're not going to budge on that. That we want to continue that relationship, and they are the ones that need to adjust, not us.
Mr. Humphrey, over to you, sir, for some closing comments, please.
Well, my comments are simply this. We have begun to pivot towards Africa, Nigeria in particular, for doctors, I assume in anticipation of what the US may do once it issued that threat earlier. But my question to that pivot is, what stops the same United States and this same administration tomorrow declaring, because it has a problem with Nigeria, maybe over oil, come up with some spurious reasoning that Nigeria is engaged in human trafficking and impose a restriction on Nigerian doctors? What prevents that from happening? Nothing. I mean, Trump is picking a fight with Canada. But how has the Canadians responded? They've stood up. They say we are not for sale, right? And Terry and I know that because we went all to the same school. The only school we didn't go to, Terry and I, well, he branched off and went to medicine and went to Cuba. I didn't. But we went to the same school. We grew up in the same environment, right? And we knew the worst thing you can do in the face of a bully is to start running. Well, first of all, you won't be able to outrun him, but you'll be continuously running. And the best way to deal with a bully is to stand up. Once you stand up and your fist up, right, the bullying stops. No, it is not wise for Grenada to pick a fight with the United States. I mean, we can't survive. This is a population of 100,000 people, right? But the prescription as issued by William Joseph, because what William Joseph is saying in that word, from what I gathered from all that he said in his recent puke, as I describe it, is that essentially Grenada should send all the Cubans back and pack up and go to the United States. I think this issue, where we find ourselves now, is a CARICOM issue, right? It's a CARICOM issue, and therefore I anticipate that CARICOM would respond, and that's the best response that Grenada can give, right? Ralph Gonzalez didn't take a fight. He simply said, come to St. Vincent, anybody from the American government, you're free to interview all of the Cubans here. Here are the body of our labor laws. You can interview the trade unions, and not all the trade unions support me. So you can go to those and see whether or not you find the evidence upon which you are pronouncing this new policy against us and in the region, right? So we ought not to pick a fight, but we ought to intensify. As a matter of fact, what has happened to Grenada right now is the most splendid argument why CARICOM should be strengthened. Yep. And we should move hastily to strengthen CARICOM, because this is where our survival, in the world of today, this is where our salvation lies. The world is changing, as Terry pointed out. Soon, we won't have to use the SWIFT system to transfer money. And our illustrious head of our central bank has taken the correct steps, which of course Willie Joseph disagreed with and calls it dangerous. But he has taken the correct step. In other words, there's a storm on the horizon brewing. We are not sure which path it will take, but we must start to prepare. And preparations means that we have to intensify. Then internally in each country, we have to revive what I call Project Grenada. It is still very relevant. It is not a tactical step. It is a strategic mission in which all Grenadians must be allowed to participate in the processes for Grenada And there must be no discrimination based on a color card. Right? Terry and I have differences on some issues. There's no doubt about that. But Terry and I are very close colleagues and friends. And there are things that we share that no one can set us under. And that is how we must treat our country. The government must come to realize that governance requires quite a lot of sophisticated moves on the chessboard. And those individuals, Dr. Perry has said it, they don't have all the answers. So Project Grenada, in which we invite all of the talent of Grenadians, irrespective of which color card you have, must be brought together in the benefit of this very small nation. And I'm going to end by saying this point. It cannot be dictated purely by the vote. And when I see what's happening to the Monroe's Ridge, the Monroe's Ridge is being now converted into a squatters camp. It's at the apex of the heart of our tourism industry. And simply because of a vote, it's being regularized and presents a threat to the future and present economy of the state. And again, it is simply because they are not engaging individuals, right? I unlike William, I'm not looking for a job, but I'm just simply saying that the challenges we face as a small state cannot be handled properly if we continue, as Peter David would say, the politics of tribalism and the politics of color card. So if I'm to advise the government of Grenada, I am saying full speed ahead, full throttle forward of strengthening CARICOM and relying on CARICOM, right? Because there is nothing written in the playbook which says today or tomorrow. Okay, so you're moving to Mount Sinai and you're moving to get displaced Cuban medical assistance and you're bringing in Africans. What happened when Trump had a problem with oil in Nigeria? How are you dealing with that? So, these are my closing remarks.
Mr. Humphrey, thank you so much. Dr. Marish, thank you so much. Of course, we have exhausted this segment, but of course, many important salient points were raised that we will continue. And as we say on the Bub Report, we do watch the space. So, gentlemen, thank you for appearing on the Bub Report this week. Viewers and listeners, this has been another episode of the Bub Report. We discussed a very important issue this week with respect to the visa sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on some officials of the government of Grenada with respect to Grenada's relationship with Cuba and Cuba's medical mission program. Of course, the U.S. essentially is punishing Grenada for continuing to maintain the program in its current form, accusing the government of Grenada of co-opting with the Cuban government in activities of human trafficking. On behalf of the producers of the Bub Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. We thank you for tuning in to this week's program. Take care. Bye-bye.